So, hello and welcome to episode 1. How exciting, of Music, Meaning and Mental Health. My name is Mark Deeks, and these chats are very much here to take us where they take us. Themes of music, themes of what music means to us, and themes of what music can help us with in terms of how we feel about how we experience the world. And this will have an opportunity to direct us where we go in terms of the different guests that I'll be having. But I'm really excited to get this series of interviews up and running and hopefully bring you some interesting topics and make you think about the role that music plays in your life and how music could potentially help you going forward. So I'm really excited to introduce the first guest, Kostas Panagiotou. I've been trying to practice your surname, but I thought we should probably get it straight from the horse's mouth. So Kostas, welcome to Music, Meaning and Mental Health. Please could you just give us and everyone watching a brief introduction to what it is that you do?
Hi, thank you, Mark. Thanks a lot for inviting me. And by the way, you pronounced it very beautifully, so my compliment. Yes, Kostas Panagiotou. I'm originally Greek, as you can probably guess from my name. I've traveled a little bit around. I used to live in Greece and then to Belgium, then to England and then to Wales. I'm a musician, but I'm also a coach. I work for the victim services as well. So I have all sort of these different hats, if you like, that I'm taking on and off regarding, depending on what I'm doing. But really, I'm just into helping people and into entertaining people, or creating emotions, manipulating emotions. Those are the main themes that run through the things that I'm doing.
Fantastic. So we've got some different kinds of questions, some about music and the role that it's played in your life and your musical interests. So let's get started with some easy ones. So do you have a favorite of all time band or artist or singer? Who is your ultimate musician, and could you describe their music to a new fan in 5 words or less?
That's challenging, Mark.
I'm not strict on the 5 words.
I love it. Well, if I really was to say, I mean, it's hard to pick one. It's because I'm listening to so many different genres. So I could say Johann Sebastian Bach, classical music, or Pink Floyd, probably my absolute favorite. But you know what? I'm going to pick something more obscure. It's one of my favorites, the band called Skepticism. They play a so-called funeral doom genre. I'm mentioning them because I'm sure it's something that not many people have heard. And I love the idea of describing the music in 5 words. Funeral music that makes happy.
I love it. So, I mean, for those of you who are watching who don't know about the band Skepticism, I mean, I must confess I'm a fan as well. But just give people watching a brief description of their sound. You don't have to stick to 5 words anymore. What is this music sound like?
It does sound like a funeral, really. That's the whole genre gets inspired by the whole solemn feeling of a funeral. It's more about the solemnity, the stillness of the atmosphere that you come across in a cemetery.
And the slowness of it.
The slowness, yeah, exactly. It's quite slow. For those who have seen the band live, they see, I mean, they visually manage to also convey that on stage. So I think they're doing it really well. So they're really slow in their movements, very deliberate. It's almost like some sort of Tai Chi with music playing, which I love the whole concept around it. I know it sounds quite gloomy, funeral doom, and for most people it probably is, but it generally is music that brings me happiness. I think we listen to music because it makes us, feel something positive, And I think that some of us are just wired a bit differently in that we actually listen to dark music and actually find it, it makes us happy, by lack of another word, while most people will probably get a bit miserable and depressed by listening to this type of music.
Yeah, totally. I can totally identify with that. I've had many a conversation in my lifetime saying that I can fall asleep listening to black metal music, and it sends me away, it relaxes, and of course, for many people, this is a very aggressive form of music. So no, I totally understand what you're saying. Can you remember the first tape or CD or vinyl that you bought with your own money, and do you still own it?
Okay, I do remember it. I don't own it anymore, unfortunately. It was a 7-inch, actually, because, I know vinyl has come back now, but actually at the time it was still in the first wave. Mm-hmm. And it was a single from Innuendo from Queen. So you had Innuendo from one side, and you had I think a track called Bijou on side B, quite atmospheric sort of guitar effect.
And you said you don't own it, but do you own it on another format since? Have you since picked up that song again?
Digitally, any compilation albums, Queen is a band that for me was always like individual songs that I like, but the whole concept about the theatricity at the time, it really made a huge impression in my head. In the end of the track, I was, I think, 12 years old when it came out. So I said to my mom, she was giving me every week a little bit of pocket money. I said, I'm going to buy it. Thing. I said, it's your money. You do what you want. So
perfect.
Bought it, and I was really happy.
So I'm thinking of this question perhaps in an emotional reaction way, but however you react to it is fine. The concept of a playlist shuffle. Do you love it or hate it, and why?
I actually love it. And the reason I love it is because for work, I have been traveling quite a lot. So sometimes, 2 hours of journeys. And it's great to have constant music playing in the background. I love listening to albums, but kind of finish pretty quickly after 40, 45 minutes generally. And so having a sort of stream of good music that I've chosen myself and put in my iPod to shuffle. I absolutely love the concept. It's great. I love as much listening to albums in the right order as I do listening to a good playlist, with a shuffling track. So yeah, bring it on, I say.
Do you have playlists set to shuffle that are of a similar theme, not necessarily theme or a style? So would you have a playlist that was going to shuffle of a certain style, and then you can choose which playlist you want to listen to depending on your mood?
I do, yes, to some extent. And for instance, from my coaching work, I have a motivational playlist that I've set up with songs that really, the theme is they pump me up, basically. So, and probably more in the genre that you would expect than most people would expect. I mean, things like Bolt Thrower, for instance, which is a metal band, which makes me feel really, let's go for it. So I've got that. And I've got some chilled playlists for someone who listens to metal. Probably doesn't come as a surprise to you because a lot of metal people listen actually to a lot of ambient music, but I have playlists with only ambient music, really nice concentration, meditation. So that's definitely a thing. Chill is a big thing for me. So something that's for me, my background music. I play it in the background while I'm doing something else. And that cannot be too intrusive. So that's usually a playlist which is themed like chilled or ambient or something like that.
So when you were a child, when you were growing up, did anyone in your family play an instrument? And did you ever try to join in? Can you think about how music perhaps was used in that way within your family as a child?
Yes, interestingly, my biggest memory from my childhood is actually my grandfather. He played the violin, and he played these really sad songs from Minor Asia. Minor Asia, I mean, it's historical for those who know a bit of history. There was a bit of a disaster there where the Greeks, they came as refugees to Greece from Minor Asia, but they actually brought all this culture with them, all these beautiful songs and music, a lot of them being quite miserable because we lost everything. That sort of thing. So my grandfather was playing quite a lot of that stuff. Joining in, it was taking me somewhere. I'm not sure if it was joining us and I want to sing along. It was more about, it was making me travel. And that's the concept that I got from music, is that it makes you travel. I was going to listening to the stories behind and going
in your imagination.
In my imagination, yes. So going really where the music was taking me mentally, really. And that is my sort of earliest impressions. Other people were playing music as well, but I guess I was a bit older then, so it was a difference. So that's the first memory, my grandfather with the violin.
Did he ever try and show you how to play? Did you ever try the violin yourself?
No, I think he was a bit precious about it. He wasn't particularly very sharing with his... He played a number of instruments. He actually did it professionally for a period of time. So he did different things, and that was one of the things that he did. And then by the time I was listening, he was doing it for the hobby, obviously, he wasn't doing it professionally anymore. But I think he was doing it for himself. That's another sense I got from music. You do it for your own mind, because he seemed to be enjoying, whether you enjoyed what he was doing, it seemed to be less important. It was more about, I'm in the zone, now I'm doing it, I'm playing the violin, and hopefully you can enjoy it. If not, well, I still enjoy myself. So
yeah, it was something that was for him.
Yeah, it was.
Yeah. So, did you ever have any lessons on an instrument as a child? And if so, did you ever, not necessarily just the violin, but any particular instruments? Did you ever have a lesson when you were a child?
Yes, I mean, when I'm a child, not really when I was really young. I started playing the piano when I was 15, which is relatively old. Um, where I should have started earlier because I was hearing music in my head since the age of 12, maybe 13, all these sort of tunes, but I just couldn't do anything with them. So yeah, I bought, I actually did 1 year of music theory first for some reason, because you have to do that before you start playing the instrument. You have to do a year of theory, which I found a bit awkward without actually playing the instrument.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I started playing my second year, the actual piano lessons. And in the beginning, I bought the keyboard for myself, and I was just messing about, because I didn't have a clue. And the lessons kind of helped me to structure a little bit what I was doing into practice.
Can you remember how it started to make you feel when you started to create the sound yourself? Do you remember any kind? I mean, it's difficult to think about when we're young, but when when people talk about the sort of taking the stabilizers off the bike moment, when you first realize that you are propelling the bike yourself, or when you first drive yourself, I wonder whether you were aware of any kind of difference between listening to your Queen record or your Grandad playing, and when you started to go, oh wow, I'm doing this. Can you think about any of those feelings?
Yeah, I do actually remember the feelings because it was so powerful. When I first got my keyboard and I couldn't even play, but I was playing 8 hours a day, playing.
Yeah.
The thing with it was like one of these keyboards that had a preset of rhythm, so I would just put the rhythm on, and then just and in my head it sounded like the biggest symphony, and people around me probably it didn't sound good at all. It was just the excitement, for me it was about I don't know, exploration, something that was, so the possibility of creating something that is not there before. I guess this whole idea was really fascinating for me. So even when I started playing, I was still playing with a mindset of I want to actually write music, because like I said, I was actually hearing music in my head. So even though I wasn't enjoying the actual playing, it was more about, wow, the possible worlds that can be created once I understand how to put things together, So
that's interesting that your immediate reactions were a feeling of possibility for what this then meant as a future thing, rather than necessarily recreating something that already existed. Because I guess, speaking for myself, I experienced a little bit as a teenager. You first sort of pick up a guitar and you want to, play your favorite like Alice in Chains songs or Nirvana songs or Oasis songs. You wanted to try and replicate, but you were very much approaching it from the idea of like, oh, if I can do this, I will be able to do, something else.
Yes, you're absolutely right, Mark. It was the other way around. Now, of course, I started enjoying once I kind of, understood a bit more about the mechanics of playing. Then I started enjoying playing other pieces. And then I was playing my favorite tracks like Vangelis, Jean-Michel Jarre. I was into that sort of stuff at the time. So I was trying to, to play and arrange them. But really, my first impulse in the beginning was, wow, I wasn't even interested, I think, to recreate something existing. It was more about, let's see where it takes us, let's try different things and create something new that is not there before. Yeah.
So I'm really interested in the different ways that people, for want of a better expression, use music. So whether it's for entertainment or meditation or creation or some kind of emotional release, whatever it is, and people use music in very different ways. So I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about how you remember music playing a role in your family as a childhood, maybe with your friends as much as your family. What kind of role did music play? Did you go and watch bands? Did you have some kind of emotional reaction to that? Did you have friends you were sharing music with? Was it part of your sort of social conversation like that? What kind of musical role did it play when you were younger?
I think music played, thinking back at my childhood, it played so many different roles because I can remember so many different contexts, and then it meant something different. One of my earliest memories, for instance, is a concert of a Greek artist called Lykeria. That was probably the first concert that I went to, definitely the first I remember. And I must have been 5 years old. and it was in Kavala, my birth town, in the football stadium. And I still remember it, even though I was that young.
Wow.
And I also remember I was singing along to all the songs, and I was singing so loudly I was actually bothering the people behind me, but I was super enthusiastic. So, you know, for me, that was about sharing, being part of the whole thing and getting enthusiastic about all these popular songs, you know, that everyone knew, almost like I felt I was a bit part of a bigger whole, you know, that was sort of the idea. In terms of friends, you know, in my early days, music was a very personal thing, maybe because that's how I saw my grandfather approaching it. So I wasn't thinking too much in terms of, oh, you know, like, let's listen together with friends. It was more about what it does for me. Really, so other than that concert that I mentioned, my memories are more about my own with my headphones or whatever, just sitting in front and listening to the same track over on the old tape record, you know, over and over again, the same track, you know, rewind. And so, yeah, it was a very personal thing most of the time. It was just doing something to my head. The social element almost came a bit later, that sort of idea of, okay, I need to actually, I would really like to be part of others, you know, when it comes to the music experience.
So thinking about now as an adult, how do you currently use music? I know that you mentioned you use ambient music from some kind of meditative way. Do you use do you have music on in the background when you're working, or do you have times where you actively listen? And this concept people speak of deep listening, where, you know, everything is off, all phones are off, you know, even lights are off, or maybe, and you concentrate solely on the music. Do you have times when you use music in these different ways?
Yes, I do use it in different ways. I'm a bit sad, you know. I had a conversation recently in one of my groups about how I experience music, and I'm sad in that it has evolved over the years. And I remember that deep listening, I was doing much more of it maybe 20 years ago, perhaps before the internet and the broadband came and made everything easily accessible. And now there's music everywhere. I'm not sure if it's a good thing that music is available, not for me anyway, everywhere and so easily. Because for me, part of the appeal was kind of that mystical feel of, you know, kind of the music is something precious, you know, you just need to do effort to go and buy it or listen to it. I was reading reviews, for instance, and didn't have any way of actually listening to the music. But in my head, I could almost imagine how the music sounds. All these bands I was mentioning earlier, Skepticism and all that, there was a reviewer in a local heavy metal magazine who was writing all these very imaginative reviews, very short ones, like 4 or 5 sentences. And without having listened to a single note of this music, I just knew that's going to be my favorite genre. I just know it, the way it's described. That's the music I crave right now. And that mysticism is a little bit lost. So, you know, the whole idea of listening deep, I mean, at the time I would buy an album and I would just listen to it every week, and I will have the booklet and then just get into the artwork, and I know the lyrics by heart. And it's not like that anymore. It's more... you know, something that I wouldn't say it's always in the background. I still use them actively, but it's much more sort of functional when I listen to music nowadays. Like I said, when I'm driving, I need to have it in the background. Yes, I listen to it, but I concentrate on the road, obviously, mostly. So yeah, for work, I do have it sometimes in the background as well, more the ambient, sort of more quiet types of music, generally speaking. But I also like to sit in silence, you know, that's something I actually enjoy as well sometimes, just the idea of enjoy it, almost like hear the sounds of the silence, you know, that sometimes in itself is quite interesting.
Yeah, absolutely. So are you able to connect any pieces of music or records to a particular time or person or place? I'm really interested sometimes how music can fulfill different roles for different people. The same song, so we hear the same song, we hear the same artist in different ways, and we talked earlier about how one genre can have a different reaction in one person to another. But I'm often fascinated by the personal preference of music, and that, you know, 2 people can agree completely on 10 artists, but then the 11th artist they have very, very different reactions to. Are you able to talk about how music reminds you of particular times or places, and how you have these kind of emotional reactions to music?
Yeah, certain music does, and I can almost like see in front of me what I was doing the first time I was listening to albums. I was 25 years ago since I first heard them, or, you know, something along these lines. I can think, for instance, albums like, you know, there's a band called Monumentum in Absentia Christi, and it was really difficult for me to get hold of the album at the time. When I did, I still remember the excitement. Oh my God, you know, like I have it in my hands. I can't believe it. And so that feeling is still there. The same for a band called Esoteric, the Pernicious Enigma. At the time, it was a record that I didn't think I would ever find. And then I managed to speak to the guitarist when the internet finally came. I spoke to the guitarist, can I buy it? But then it still took 2 months until I actually received it. And I still remember seeing it at home. I couldn't, but it was like almost a surreal experience. I would say that is it real? It's actually in front of me, the album. And the feeling is still there, whenever I pick up that record and the sleeve and everything, I can think back of the time. And I really, really enjoy a connection. It's one of the few things that actually, because I'm not someone who often goes in the past to delve, I'm one of those people that kind of, the past is the past and then I'm just looking forward, And music is just actually the one thing that actually takes me right back, as you said earlier. It does actually have very specific connections with particular events. Might not even be the most, shocking event or traumatic or big. Just particular things I can see in front of me, how the room looked like when I was listening to the album, where the record player was, etc., etc. It's quite fascinating, actually.
Yeah, absolutely. I used to play a lot of music at weddings and events, and when people were choosing the music that they wanted, I was forever trying to discourage them from picking what they thought was like the currently popular love song or whatever. And I said, it doesn't matter if no one else in the room knows what this song is. I want a song that reminds you of, in the context of a wedding, each other. I want the song that you played on the radio on that holiday 10 years ago. I want the song that you remember dancing to in a club 15 years ago, whatever it is. I want the songs that are the story of you guys, irrelevant of whether you know anyone else in the room knows it, because the music has the power to do that. One thing I always remember laughing at, there's a Foo Fighters song. I was a big Foo Fighters fan when I was a teenager, and Nirvana fan and so on. And there's a Foo Fighters lyric that says, I saw the boat and the kingdom. And I always thought that he was deliberately mispronouncing the word kingdom, because it needed to rhyme with the word home in the next line kind of thing. Until I was 18 years old in Seattle on holiday with my parents, listening to it as we drove past the Kingdom in Seattle, which is like the baseball arena, and it's next to the harbor where the boats are. And I was like, I see the boats and the Kingdom.
You got it.
Yeah, and now it made perfect sense. It's funny how I still remember this 25 years later, how the music transports us back. I can still see the harbor in my mind's eye. It's really...
Yes, it's funny how it's connected to memories.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Are you conscious of how music makes you feel when you listen to it, either physically or mentally? Any effect that it has on you? If you, it might be less obvious if you're having it on in the background, but if you actually say, I want to listen to this, are you conscious of any kind of physical or emotional reaction to it when you listen to it?
Yes, I am. I think for me, sometimes things are muddled up a bit because I play music myself, and I get a different feeling when I play music as opposed to when I listen to it. But yeah, even by listening, I can think of several episodes where, depends on the type of music I'm listening, but how my emotions started to change or to shift, started feeling of euphoria. Very often as a kid, I had this sort of seeking towards a more kind of a mystical feel. I had the sense that everything is connected. It's kind of hard to explain. Music was bringing it out. Certain music was bringing that feeling out, everything. I could see how things are connected in a bigger sense. I don't know if it makes sense, but it was like an almost mystical feeling of listening to music. I was one with the music at the moment, and the feeling, just a feeling of oneness. I have no other way of putting it, really. And sometimes there's euphoria, exhilaration, sometimes just like I say, pumped up if it's something that really was. I remember listening to pop music at the time, and certain songs with good rhythm that I was really getting. It was make me think, I can conquer the world. Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about that because obviously I know, but people watching might not necessarily know. You're in a band called Pantheist, and you've had a long career in Pantheist. I was wondering, how do you think being in a band that has like a quite well established following, you've got a fan base, people who follow what you do you think having that kind of attention on the music that you've created has affected your mental health in any way? Do you think there's ever been any kind of positive or negative impacts over the years of just having people who are aware of your music and are going to have a reaction to it? Are you ever conscious of how that has played out for you?
Yes, I would say both positive and negative, to be fair. The negative more related to the fact that I was very, not anymore, but in the earlier days, I was very sensitive to criticism and to negative reviews, and I was getting I really want that. I could have like 10 positive reviews, the 11th wasn't positive. I was losing my mind, not good for your mental health.
Yeah.
I don't recommend it. I got over it. So that was a negative, but of course, a lot of positives as well. The positives being just the idea of belonging, when you do something of purpose, of belonging, of connectedness, and especially when you work with musicians, which is something I learned to actually appreciate more by doing it. Because like I said, when I started playing music, it was more about for myself. I'm just doing it because I love doing it. But the more I started doing, I realized to actually, to be able to execute this music that is in my head, I need other people, other musicians. Yeah. And in the beginning, I almost saw them as instruments, that they're just there to play the role and do what I have in my head. But with time, I started appreciating the idea of getting involved. And just the feeling that I get is really positive connectedness with other musicians that are like-minded and we have a similar purpose almost. It's like a tribe, isn't it? Very positive feeling. I think it really does something positive.
Yeah, absolutely. I think I don't know what you feel about this, but as I've got older, certainly in the last year or two, I've started to become more aware of any music that I create is almost like a legacy. And it sounds like quite dramatic and pretentious to sort of say, this is what I'm leaving behind. And that's not necessarily the kind of reaction that a young person might have. But I started to sort of almost see music that I created a bit more from the outside, that this is what I will leave, and legacy sounds pretentious, but this is what I have created, and I've started to sort of feel almost a little bit more selfish about it, in that if I'm going to leave something behind, I must be entirely happy with it. I think perhaps for my case, having made a living from music for so many years, creating music to other people's specifications, that when it came to creating my own music, I need to be totally satisfied with this. Otherwise, what was the point? I need to leave it behind. I don't know if you feel like you've ever sort of seen your music in that way and having an emotional reaction to sort of, this is what I will leave. Have you ever felt like that at all?
Yeah, no, I think it's spot on, Mark. It is, for me, it is about legacy. Pantheist especially, because I've been involved in different projects, and some others, they're not as important for me. I played in a band called Crippled Black Phoenix. I wasn't actually writing any of the music. I was just helping with the arrangement. So for me, that was not about legacy. It was about having fun and connecting with other people. But in this particular band, in Pantheist, in my solo project, it's pretty much about, what is it about that I want to make music that in 5, 10, 20, why not 200 years, people can still listen to, and still say, what, it doesn't matter that it was made so long ago. I can feel the emotions, because for me, it's all about the connections, the emotions that you convey, and how you can get people to connect to it. And it doesn't matter how many people, could be 2 million people. It's all about what you do. Even if you influence 1 or 2 people, then the legacy is there. So yeah, from that perspective, definitely.
I wondered if you, when you're creating your music, how much do you rely on feel? How much is it about the emotion for you that you're creating?
Mostly about emotion, I would say. I mean, I'm not, and in my music, and for those who know the genre that I play, it's not technical music. It's not about being artistically perfect or anything like that. In fact, being a bit of flawed is seen as a positive thing in the genre, because it's kind of part of the whole doominess of it all. Yeah, I mean, for me, it's definitely. I lost the train of my thoughts here.
No, just talking about how much you rely on feel and emotion when creating music.
Yeah, it is about the feeling. It is about the feeling, because it's really, if I don't feel anything, then I can't actually hit on my keyboard, And that's, by the way, even I did a few soundtracks. So we spoke earlier about doing music on other people's specifications. So that was pretty much the director said, I want something that's like that. But even with that, I couldn't produce something that I couldn't feel it. It had to be something that I felt it was right in that particular scene of the film or theater piece or whatever it was that I wrote it for. So for me, it's all, take away the feeling and there's not much left, really.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for your thoughts. It's been really interesting. I got one more question for you. If you had to recommend one piece of music to give someone's mental health an uplift, to make them feel good and to make them have hope, what would it be?
Okay. Well, staying a bit true to the more sort of extreme genres that I'm into, I would pick up a track from Bolt Thrower that I mentioned earlier called No Guts, No Glory. And, well, I think the title says it all for those who haven't heard it. It's just the whole sense of, you can do it. You can do it. So just go ahead and do it. That's the sense that I'm getting. I think that's what you get as a listener, like no guts, no glory. That's, the idea of this, just go for it and you get your goals no matter what they are. And I think it's a very powerful feeling that you get from that.
I saw Bolt Thrower live not long before they split up. It was like 15 years ago or something. And maybe it's not that many, 10, 15 years ago. And I have rarely had so much fun at a gig. I've rarely had. I found the live experience was just uplifting and rousing, and maybe I had a couple of beers too, but yeah,
that helps.
Yeah, really uplifting stuff. Kostas, thank you so much. If anyone wanted to reach out to you and get in contact and find a bit more about what you do, perhaps with your coaching, tell people where they can find you online.
Yeah, they can find me several places. I mean, if they're on Facebook and they are into the idea of coaching, I have a group called From Vision to Action, and I'm more than welcome to join me there and have a conversation, or just like my page, Kostas Panagiotou, From Vision to Action. Bit of a mouthful. If they want to listen to my music, as you mentioned earlier, my band Pantheist, you can find them everywhere on social media, on Spotify. Just listen to it if you do funeral, do metal. I also have some solo piano music, which is completely different. So they can find me again under Kostas Panagiotou on Spotify. You can listen to my music there as well if you're into more instrumental piano tunes.
That's brilliant. Listen, thank you so much for your time. Really interesting. Thank you for kicking off the Music, Meaning and Mental Health series. It's been fantastic to speak to you. Kostas Panagiotou, thank you very much.
It was an absolute pleasure. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.